welcome all of you this afternoon to hear Dr. Xavia Karner give her wonderful talk that's going to be on contemplative photography. She is the head of Sociology Department at the University of Houston, has done all sorts of written articles of all sorts in many different literature. So we're honored to have her here, and I hope you'll give her a warm welcome.
Well, thank you. I am honored to be here, and it's always nice to get out of your usual place and get to come and talk to new people about, especially about things that you really enjoy. And I am kind of passionate about photography, so I'm delighted to have the opportunity to come here and talk to you about this. The title of my talk might be a touch misleading, but bear with me. Contemplative photography or contemplating photography. I like to think that I do both, and I'm going to begin by talking about the latter as a means to approach the former, so hopefully not to confuse you too much. But as you've probably noticed, we live in a very image-saturated world. Some estimate that in the Western world we see about 15,000 images a day, and others estimate that even more images cross our sight. Indeed, images are ubiquitous in the modern world. We're continually surrounded by images. In 2007, a market research, Yakovlevich, estimated that a person living in a city 30 years ago, so 1987 about, saw only about 2,000 ads per day. But now, or now of 2007, 5,000 images a day are what we see. And most of these, sorry, not images, ads, and most of these ads are image-based as well. In the contemporary world, images have advanced science and let us see far away. This is an image from Hubble Space Telescope. Oh, it's not. Oh, sorry. In the contemporary world, images let us see far away. They've advanced science, taken us to new places. They let us see far away as well as up close in new ways. Modern medicine has been revolutionized through photographic technology, from X-rays to fMRIs to nanotechnology. Imaging now allows us to see things that were once unimaginable. We use images to communicate. They become kind of a universal, maybe even a post-language that transcends nationalities, ethnicities. Images bring us the news as photojournalism. We tend to believe what we see through images. Photographs record our historical moments and document the unthinkable. They transport us to places we've never been. That was Machu Picchu. It's still on my bucket list. And they introduce us to how other people live. You may recognize this image. This is the Steve McCurry image of the Afghani girl that was on the cover of National Geographic, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, which was the most popular, highest-selling issue National Geographic ever had. And people were so taken with this image, especially her eyes, that Steve McCurry actually spent several years going back to Afghanistan trying to find her. Eventually did, and was able to take this second image of her many years later. So not only do we see people across the world, but we get to see them over time as well. We use images to provide logistical information about where we are. The click of your cell phone can take you amazing places and give you all the information to get from point A to point B in cities you've never visited before. Visual imagery entertains us, sells us products, keeps us informed, and shapes the way we come to understand our world. In a recent U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics time use study, they found that respondents aged 15 and older spent the average of 2.7 hours a day, half of the stated leisure time, watching television. We get our images from the screens now, and the screens are visual. Images, more and more, we're spending time online, that second favorite screen in the household. A Harris poll from 2009, dating my century, found that 76% of adults surveyed used the internet at home, 40% used it at the office, and together they averaged 13 hours a week online. Most surprising, though, at least to me anyway, was that adults aged 30 to 39 were actually the highest users of the internet. So we're online, but we're also creating and sharing images at an amazing rate. This is a project, 365 project. It's a website that encourages you to take an image, to make an image every day and post it to the website. This becomes kind of a visual diary for the individuals who participate, but it also becomes a visual diary of our culture and our time in many ways. So it's kind of fascinating. Facebook, of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with by now, is built on the idea that we want to document our life through text and images and then share it with our few hundreds of friends online. If Facebook was a country, it would be the third largest in the world now. That's kind of amazing. It wasn't even there. It's 6-7 years old. It's amazing. In January of 2011, Facebook had over 200 million photos uploaded per day. About 6 billion per month. At the time, there were 90 billion photos on Facebook, making it the largest photo website on the internet. With their recent acquisition of Instagram, which has been in the news all week, I'm sure it's only going to increase. Advances in technology, photographic as well as the internet, are making this increasingly visual world possible. As a visual sociologist, it's almost too good to be true. All this data out there that somebody else is collecting and putting out there for me, just waiting to be mined. And sometimes it's even organized for me. I don't know if you're familiar with the groups on Flickr, but people are often encouraged to, someone will post a question and then people are encouraged to photograph that aspect of their life and then post it. So if you ever wonder what people in the 21st century have in their wallets, you can crowdsource it. There's a group on Flickr. They may not be the most aesthetically pleasing images, but they're great data. And so for me, I just think this is absolutely wonderful. And then, of course, there's cell phones. Almost everyone has a cell phone with a camera now. I heard the other day on NPR a story that cell phones have doubled in the last year. In 1 year, they've doubled. And another story on NPR, last week, they were talking about rural areas of India where they don't have plumbing, they don't have running water, but everybody has a cell phone with a camera. It's truly amazing. The technology for image making now is now in the hands of the many in ways that we could have never guessed when I was a wee babe. And the software to process these images, and the software is also available at modest cost in the modestly priced apps in the App Store. You can get all kinds of interesting filters for your pictures, but also through shareware like this, the computerizational photography, which will stitch all these images together and you can have amazing panoramas of spaces. You just basically have to download and take the images. It's really revolutionary. So what the average person can now do in terms of creating and sharing images is amazing to those of us who remember the days when you had to take film to be developed. And not only that, you had to wait probably a week before you got that little envelope with your negatives and your photographic prints inside. So this is just mind-boggling in some ways. The technology has advanced, but generally we still use our cameras in the very same ways we have for years to document moments in our lives. especially when we travel. Of course, that's if you don't photograph the rest of your life, when you go on a trip, for some reason the camera immediately comes out. We like to show that we were there, wherever there is. We're sure it's important, and inevitably we'll post this to Facebook at some point, I'm sure. We like to document our family. We like to document rites of passage and significant times in our lives. We often make photographs of people or places or times that we want to make sure that we can remember. All of these images that we are creating and sharing provide rich data for the visual sociologist. Images are how we come to know our world, ourselves, as part of this broader community. I mean, what do Texans really look like? We could go on Flickr. I'll bet there's a group for that. But also ourselves, the kind of who we are as we live here and now in the modern age, the processes and the times and the events that happen in our life. A number of photography experts believe that every photograph you take, every photograph you make, is a self-portrait. The photographer's way of seeing the world comes through with each image. Their desires, their prejudice, their fears can all be seen in the photographs they make. This is an image from Joseph Kadolka, one of my favorite photographers, from his series called Exiles. He made this work, this body of work, while he indeed was in exile. He'd left Czechoslovakia after the revolution. Each image in the series shows a sense of difference and isolation. There's always one lone figure separated from a group. Though they're all contained in the same photographic frame, it's clear that one person is not included in the group and does not belong in the same way that the others do. Thus, in every image, Kadolka is sharing his own sense of exile, of not belonging, of having no home. Not surprisingly, his next series, he went to photograph gypsies in Romania. It's not a big leap of psychoanalysis to think that he has found this nomadic group to again photograph as a way of sharing his own sense of a nomadic, exiled existence. There's a long history of self-portraiture in photography. Even longer one in painting, but we'll save that for another day. What we might call a direct image of the physical self, to kind of be clear about it. This is Matthew Brady. This is one of the earliest ones, self-portraits that I could find. And he's famous for being a Civil War photographer. Indeed, most of the images we have of the Civil War were taken by him. The inscription on this image denotes that he was the photographer at Bull Run in 1861. So not only is it an image of himself, but he's contextualizing it with text to let us know the importance of the moment for him and for the country. These are a series of self-portraits that Edward Steichen made of himself. He was the first curator of photography at MoMA and an important figure in moving photography into the realm of fine art. The first image was made in 1898. He was just finishing school and getting ready to go off to New York City to seek his fortune. The empty frame in the background is an intriguing and possibly foretelling detail. The second image is taken in 1902, 4 years later, when he is indeed in New York City seeking his fortune. The interesting thing about this image is the use of painter's props. There's no record of Steichen ever learning to paint, wanting to be a painter, or painting, but indeed this is the way he's chosen to create his self-portrait at that time. The final image, made in 1929, shows him in the midst of photographic props. At this point in time, he was considered quite successful and an accomplished photographer. So this is his height of success, in a sense. So it's wonderful to see the self as it ages, but the sense of self as it shifts and transforms through time as well. This is slightly more recent than Steichen. This is the 1960s. This is Chuck Close. He is constructing a rather brash image of a young man ready to take on the art world, I would say. I would interpret it that way. He, too, is constructing a very specific view of himself to share with the world. The choice and the use of specific props is also compelling with this example from Robert Mapplethorpe. He's further using aesthetic choices to construct a precise view of himself by playing with light and shadow. What is he revealing? What is he keeping hidden? Another approach that we see in self-portraiture, I call artist as performer, just as kind of a shorthand. And this is Cindy Sherman, who's probably one of the most famous photographers working in this vein. And this is from the body of work called Untitled Film Stills that was probably, it was the body of work that she became famous initially and received a lot of recognition for. She is creating images that reflect upon previous cultural images. This is not a self-portrait about her, Cindy Sherman. Indeed, she disguises herself in the guise of social stereotypes. She's not recreating the previous images, the actual movie stills here, but she's using the same aesthetic, the same kind of costumes, the same makeup, the camera angles to evoke that earlier way of creating such images. It becomes a commentary on a cultural dialogue. Here's Diane Ducret, also in the same vein, is using herself almost as a model in her own work. She creates images that speak to the experience of being female in the contemporary society. She also photographs herself in the context of her family at times, almost as co-conspirators in another project. In her work, the self is seen not as herself, but as a cultural symbol, a metaphor for a shared experience. Others take an even more constructed approach to their performance. This is Kimiko Yoshida, who creates elaborate costumes and makeup for her images. In her work, she turns herself into famous painters, brides from all over the world, blown glass letters and symbols, among other kinds of performances. So here, the blue is an image from her Vowel series. She went to Venice and had hand-blown glass vowels that she then places on her face, and each vowel is a different color. So it's a whole kind of performance about symbol use. And the right on the side is from her portraits of brides, and so she's taking historical, traditional costuming and then layering it with other kinds of issues. These are very expensive jewels that are hanging in front of the face, which is different than the traditional kind of fringe that you would have seen in China. So she's making a statement about brides and bride price and other interesting kind of cultural things. Sig Harvey constructs dreamlike, timeless images using costumes and props from the 1950s and 60s. She, like Diane Ducret, is working with metaphors and idealized images. This photograph is called Hope Chest. Primarily, her images refer to relationship issues. Her recent book, I love this title, is called You Look at Me Like an Emergency. As a sociologist interested in identity, I find all of these practices, these different ways of creating self and performing self and documenting self, absolutely fascinating. However, it's the work that attempts to demonstrate or share an experience or a process of self that I'm drawn to and I find incredibly compelling. I have 3 examples of this kind of work to share with you today. Kurt Weston was a young man and found he had degenerative eye disease and is losing his sight. When he made this project, he still had some of his peripheral vision, but he wanted to express the inner experience of what was happening to him. Using familiar symbols of hazy glass and cleaning suds, Kurt attempts to give his viewer the experience of trying to see but being unable to. And finally, his last image is his resolution. Carole Benetton, a beautiful young woman, traces her journey through breast cancer by photographing herself against a red curtain at each phase of the trajectory. Losing her breast, losing her hair, being strong for others, and the emotional mayhem that she experiences. By its very nature, this is a longitudinal project. Over the months, Benetton photographs herself with emotional brutality, using prompts and symbols to convey the depth of the psychic toll. Marie Daucher, a commercial and a fine art photographer. Good, it's working. Okay. Decided to walk the Compostela. It's also called the Way of St. James, the Way of St. James, the pilgrimage route between Spain and France. Wanting to photograph, a photographer of course, she wants to document this, but not wanting to carry her regular camera. When you walk the pilgrimage, it's about 100 kilometers and you carry everything with you. So she told me she even cut off the end of her toothbrush, so you just take the part with the bristles. So every ounce counts. So not wanting to carry her regular camera, she bought a small disposable camera and decided that her pattern would be that every time she stopped for a drink of water, she would take a picture. She wouldn't think about it. She wouldn't pose. She'd try to be as unconscious as possible and just kind of hold the camera and snap the shutter. The resulting images share her journey with us. You can see the exhaustion, you can see the solitude, you can see the resolve, you can see the reverie at times. Marie likes to say you can see the road on her face in this body of work. This kind of photographic practice led me to attempt to document my own experience of changing lenses. In this project, I used autoethnographic and visual methods, which I put together and called autophotography, to use my experience to investigate the transformative aspects of sight, whether through photography or technology. In August of 2006, the lenses in my eyes were surgically replaced with a manufactured multifocal intraocular lenses, altering within the span of just a 15-minute surgery my sight, my sense of self, my perspective on the outside world. This surgery gave me the opportunity to explore the impact of new eyes at the most personal and experiential level. Changing lenses also underscored my understanding of the primacy of eyesight in the management of self, physically, cognitively, and performatively. Generally, we take our vision for granted. We see what we see. We assume that that is what there is to see, and that everyone sees what we see. Visuality, in this particular essay, I argued, plays a crucial yet insufficiently explored role in how individuals define, narrate, express, enact, interpret, and transform their identities. Technologically mediated vision through photography was how I had previously come to see and know my world. My pre-surgery distance vision was not completely correctable, and I often used my camera as an extension of my natural eyes as a means to know my surroundings. In these images that I'm showing you now, I tried to document my uncorrected vision in the old eye image in comparison with my vision post-surgery with my new eyes. Since the age of 8, I had worn glasses or contacts to correct my distance vision as much as possible. These corrections still left the distant horizon blurry and continually out of focus. Later, as I aged into my 40s, I began to wear readers, over my contacts to see up close. So without readers, everything near was also blurry and out of focus. I took photographs so I could study them up close with my readers on and see the details that my eyes could not perceive in situ. As I reviewed the photographs from the year prior to my surgery, I found that pattern of seeing through my camera. The images were reflections of vistas, spaces beyond that could not fully be seen by my natural eyes. In my memory, I've always photographed. I was given my first camera at the age of 7 or 8, and perhaps ironically, this is the same time I was fitted with my first pair of glasses. My first camera was a little Kodak Duoflex that you held at your waist and had to look through the viewfinder at the very top. Plus, you had to turn a little knob to manually advance the film, which I routinely forgot to do at the age of 8, and often delighted in the magic of the resulting double exposures. After using borrowed SLR cameras in school for years, I was eventually given my first serious camera as a high school graduation present. A Nicormat with a split screen focus, which enabled and facilitated my field of vision. I saw less without it, I saw more with it. It became an extension of me, the tool for my technologically aided vision. Without my Nicormat, my vision on so many levels was limited. Over the years, it became second nature to me to pull out my camera when I wanted to see something, knowing, of course, that I would have to wait for the film to be developed next week to be able to actually see it. Given this time delay between events and actually getting to see them, moments in time were only partially known to me and never fully experienced visually. Experiential truths, then, were always partial and fluid as I learned to construct my images and thus my memories in a time apart from their occurrences. Where I pointed my lens, which people, which landscapes and events were documented, helped frame my reality and my memory, my consciousness of myself and my context. Though I began working as a sociologist back in the mid-1980s, it wasn't until 2004, with a project on the Burmese border, that I started to use my camera in my research to document my fieldwork in a visual manner. And even as I look back over my fieldwork images, I see that same pattern of trying to see the distance, trying to capture beyond, focusing on extended views and vistas. After my surgery, I again picked up my camera. It wasn't until I was showing some recent work to a colleague who commented, "You are using your camera in a completely different way now," that I realized I had intuitively shifted my use of my camera to parallel my new vision. Whereas prior to the surgery I could not see distance, and I used the camera to capture reflections, hidden spaces, and vistas, now I seem to be focusing on a middle space. With my new lenses, my new eyes, I could now see up close without readers, and I could see the distance, but I could not see the middle space clearly. Things beyond 18 inches from my eyes are now out of focus, a bit fuzzy and unclear. Yet it's in this middle space that the majority of social life is experienced. Reading shelf tags at the grocery store, scanning directory listings on walls, trying to read name tags at conventions, finding books on bookshelves. These are all dependent on having a clear middle vision. And my photographs now seem to concentrate on details of light and movement in that middle space. I'm no longer necessarily chasing distance or enclosed hidden spaces with my camera. Now I'm looking at what is obscured from my eyes and out in the open, in the middle space. The majority of my previous research has concerned social construction, transformation, and performance of self and identity. And I've focused specifically on points of disruption or transition, turning points, because it's within these windows of seeming chaos and change that individuals are called most acutely to actively and artfully make sense of themselves and create meaning in their experiences. In this project using autophotography, the blending of autoethnographic and photographic methods, I turned the sociological lens back on my experience of sight disruption and self. I used the camera to better understand my way of seeing. I was seeing myself by learning to see through the viewfinder, which led me to think more about how photography can be used for knowing the self of others, like the self-portraits I showed earlier, or of oneself. Which leads me finally to contemplative photography. This idea is based in Buddhist meditation practices. It's a blend of Buddhist philosophies and photographic technologies. It encourages the self, the photographer, to slow down, to reflect, to meditate, and to delight in the visual world. Contemplative photography offers a path to heightened visual awareness, imagination, and receptivity. It's a practice for cultivating another form of knowing that can lead to new insights about self and our world. The camera here becomes a practice tool. There are books out. I didn't make this up. I use the Zerher book, the small orange one, when I teach workshops on contemplative photography. I like it. It's small. It's easy to absorb little book. It's only $5 on Amazon, and you can read it in probably a half hour. There's a newer and pricier version, the Carr and Woods book, which is color. The earlier one's black and white, and this has some amazing photographs. It's quite inspirational in that sense. So I recommend them both. There are a number of places to take workshops around the country on contemplative photography. Miksan, which I won't promise that I'm pronouncing correctly, is the Tibetan word that translates into good eye. Good here is not a term of judgment, but rather it means that our mind is uncluttered by preoccupation, is relaxed and open, so we can begin to see in a more unfettered manner. When steady mind, clear vision, and soft heart come together in a single moment, good eye manifests, is the Tibetan saying. In this practice, images are received as gifts rather than taking photographs or shooting people. This approach, like meditation or contemplation, requires an attitude of quiet receptivity, an openness to what might be given, what might appear before our lenses. Based in the Buddhist practice of mindfulness, photography becomes a meditative practice. Mindfulness involves letting go of preconceived ideas and expectations, being still, being open to whatever might be received. It is to see everything but focus on nothing. Much like the Zen idea of beginner's mind, where one practices without expectation. Mindfulness is being aware of and appreciating the everyday, being open to the beauty and insights of the commonplace. Contemplative photography is all about the way you see rather than what you see. It's about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary as it's revealed within the light and the shadow of our everyday world. This approach is one of marveling more than knowing, contemplating one's view with an attitude of wonder that begins with appreciation, to see what is, to embrace the mystery, to have a tolerance for ambiguity. In this way, photography becomes meditation and communion with the visual world. In practice, time is spent calming and emptying the mind before taking up the camera to receive images. The books and the workshops offer various exercises that call one's attention to color, to texture, to light, to space, to simplicity, as it means to begin seeing everything but focusing on nothing. Some exercises work with seeing metaphors around us. In this image, the wound in the tree can be read as a metaphor for other wounds. This is from Sally Mann's Deep South series, where she's been photographing Civil War battlegrounds, meditating on all the blood spilt on these lands. The image that calls to you, the one that gives you joy and delight, often occurs when your mind, your eye, and your heart are seen together. Photographer Edward Weston suggests that one should keep one's approach free from formula, art dogma, rules, or taboos. He considered composition, what one receives within the photographic frame, as the strongest way of seeing. At the heart of contemplative photography is the desire to see the world with delight and wonder, to receive with respect and humility, to be open, to be aware, to be mindful in one's image making. What calls our attention, whether it be color or texture or light or space or simplicity or metaphor, provides insight into ourselves and our sensibilities. My post-surgery fascination with light was a revelation to me. I've since learned that backlighting, by defining the edges of objects, allows the mind to think that it sees more than it really does. Given my conscious attention to what I could no longer see, I found myself gravitating to backlit grasses. I am sure that I have more images of backlit grasses than one person could ever possibly need. But still, from time to time, I have to stop the car and get out and photograph, because the call of the beauty, the wonder, and the delight is so great. Images call to us not just because of the content. I'm really not all that fascinated with grasses, but by how the content is ordered within the frame. Weston's strongest way of seeing. Our composition creates an order, organizing visual elements to provide coherence and meaning. Through mindfulness, we can observe our personal way of making sense, of ordering our world. Within photography, we simplify chaos and disorder into a photographic frame of visual clarity. Contemplative approach to photography is an expression of wonder, grounded in respect and humility. And thus it becomes a visual record of ourselves, our way of seeing, and possibly our very way of being in the world. Henri Cartier-Bresson considered his camera a sketchbook, an instrument of intuition and spontaneity that can give meaning to the world. The camera can be our sketchbook, our practice tool, providing another means to see and to know. Indeed, contemplative photography offers a path to change our lenses and come to know ourselves and share our experiences in new ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah. The idea that you take a picture and that it's expressing from you, a part of you, is interesting because I really think when I'm taking a picture, it's out there, but it's interesting. And this, of course, is psychology all over. But in other words, I could have taken it here, but I took it there.
Exactly.
So the reason I chose was within me, not out there,
Exactly.
as I thought.
Exactly. Especially if you've ever traveled with people and you're all in the same place at the same time, but one person's taking pictures here and the other one's looking at the sky. And, same place, same time, but different choices.
And one person may take those people who are smiling, where another might take frowning or sad.
Or empty spaces rather than people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it tells us a lot about the personality behind.
So really,
but I'm not a psychologist, so I tread lightly there.
So we ought to really look at our pictures that we take and see them as a mirror, perhaps.
A mirror or a window, that's a debate in photography. Yeah, exactly. But as a tool to know more than we did before we looked at them. Definitely go that way.
Go ahead.
I have a photographer friend who lost part of her vision due to detached retina. And she was already excellent photographer before that. And she also documented her experience. I may have to talk to her and see if she might want to
I'd love to know about her. Yeah.
I can't remember if you said what your eye problem was before the surgery or
bad vision.
Oh, okay.
It was elective. I chose to do that. Yeah.
Well, it was really interesting to see, and when you talked about the guy who used the glass and soap suds to show the change, I have to remember I have to think back on what she ended up doing to capture that.
Yeah.
She did some wonderful work around that.
Does she have a website? I'd love to see her work.
She actually does.
Okay, you'll have to give me that before you go. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to. Yeah. No, that would be wonderful to know about. Yeah.
Several orange book you recommended called
the Zare.
Contemplative Photography. I've got the other one. That's why I have that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
Well, I think the smaller one is older.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, I've got the book, but he was in New York and Zen something, and he taught contemplative photography and talks about this guy that...
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's a...
and he died recently, a few years ago.
He's a monk at one of the monasteries up there. I'm forgetting the name of the one, but yes, they still sell his work.
It's a wonderful book.
They're beautiful images,
I thought about going up there, and then I read about his passing.
Too late,
he talks about the experience of going up to this retreat, and he's a photographer trying to enhance his knowledge and skill. And he says, for the first few days, there was no talk of photography, and he was ready to pack his bags and leave. And, of course, was convinced to stay.
One thing I've learned with digital is storage is cheap.
Yep.
And you don't have to pay to have it developed.
Yep.
So people tend to take thousands. I've done photo shoots where I get home and I've got 1,000 images, all in RAW. I'm not about to process 1,000 images. That's when I got interested in contemplative photography.
To slow down.
It was it's kind of like painting.
That sounds, it's very meditative.
Yeah. And I need that. Working. I'm not really.
I think we all do in the postmodern world. We all need
I actually have gone back to using, you're familiar with lomography. I bought 2 plastic cameras that were made in China that shoot medium format film. So I've kind of gone back a few steps.
Well, that slows you down. in a sense, and so it aids to that.